Will, good morning.
Morning, Neil. How are you?
I'm well. As a gay man in his early 60s who was there through the very, very dark times of the back end of the 70s and all through the 80s, have you been watching the docudrama It's a Sin?
Yeah, I have actually. I've watched it. I have 4 episodes watched, so I'm just waiting for the last one.
Is it 5 in total? Yeah. What did you
Yeah.
what did you make of it?
Um, to be honest with you, friends of mine were streamed it. They watched all the episodes, but I personally couldn't watch the whole thing. I had to I was recording it and watching it when I could because it affected me a lot. Like a lot of brought up a lot of stuff from the 80s, the bad old days.
Mm, mm.
If I'm being honest. So I've spaced it out my watching, of it, and because people were on me about my opinions, I found myself having to watch it,
Yeah.
even when sometimes I didn't feel like it, so that I could talk about it.
I found it
Um,
incredibly powerful, I have to say. The secrecy, the shame, the substance abuse, the coming to terms with it. One aspect of it that I found amazing was there was so much sexual promiscuity. Was it really like that?
I think because it had just been legalized, say in England, America maybe earlier, there was a kind of whole atmosphere of among gay men in particular, rather than women, of like, this is us, this is who we are.
Yeah.
We didn't see it as being promiscuous.
No, I'm not talking about.
I
Well, I
know.
suppose I was asking you for the comparison in Cork. It just struck me as one, but this is television. Don't get me wrong, but just one long party.
Well, if I'm being honest, because there wasn't really gay bars or anything around, I don't know if listeners would be familiar with the term cruising. Like there was a lot of cruising went on in Cork in toilets in certain areas, and we all got to know each other, and there was house parties and everything.
Yeah.
That's generally what we did, like to socialize. Like, I mean, I'm thinking back now that you asked me that, like, it's not
Yeah.
something I thought about.
Yeah.
We all, as a community, knew each other and used to have parties, much like that in those houses.
But
Yeah.
did many people from, say, Cork, for instance, just migrate to London or to bigger cities back in the early 80s, for instance, where they could be free? Because that's what it was about. It's a Sin is a coming together of gay men from lots of other parts of the UK to London.
Yeah, I think, yeah. Friends of mine emigrated and everything for various reasons. I stayed here, mainly to do with my stupid religious upbringing and wanting to be straight and all that crap.
Yeah. Yeah.
I actually spent 4 years in the seminary during the 80s, studying to be a priest. But yeah, a lot of people emigrated, and those of us that remained here, it's hard to describe this to somebody. It's got to be remembered it was still illegal in Ireland to be gay. So when you took the boat to London for a weekend or a few days, you got off the boat and you were able to be the person you were. And then when you got back home, it was illegal again,
Yeah, I know.
So it was a different world. It was.
We got to remember that
Yeah,
homosexuality wasn't decriminalised in Ireland until 1993. And before that, of course, it was a criminal act. And there was a lot of repression amongst gay men. Firstly, would it be right in saying that you had issues coming out even to yourself, never mind to your family or your friends, right?
Oh yeah, my way of coping with my sexuality was alcohol. I haven't had a drink now for 26 years, but that's how I coped. I know people say I was an alcoholic, which I was, but alcohol got me through some really, really, really dark, desperate, lonely times. I've been through a lot of counselling, AA meetings, and I'm one of these people who believe it was a part of my coping skill to deal with my life at that time.
Yeah, and well, congratulations on so many years of sobriety. But you said you went into the priesthood. Was that did you go into to try and cure yourself, or just give yourself over to God, or what was the reasoning behind that?
I honestly thought that, foolishly, that if I gave my life to God, I would be not so much cured, but I would be rid of this, because I didn't come from, my parents never ever pushed. They allowed us to go to mass whenever we wanted it. But I personally took on everything my church had said about it being, we were intrinsically evil back then. We're only intrinsically disordered now, according to the Catholic faith.
You are not. You're not. Thank God you laughed at
like
that.
we're mad now, like we were evil back then. And I literally, as a young man, believed every single thing. The criminal offence, the being a mental illness. So I thought like I would basically get the gift of celibacy and manage my life because that's what I was told, if you hand your life over to Jesus. But unfortunately, it didn't work.
So if you went into the priesthood and you stayed there there was a lot of sex.
Yeah, 4 years. And I was like frying pan fire if I wanted to get away from sex.
Yeah, that leads me on to the next point I wanted to bring up, and that had to do with priests. I mean, you obviously thought you would become a priest because you'd be celibate and you wouldn't be having sex with anybody at all. But there was sex within the priesthood with other men.
Oh God, yeah. In the seminary, my first year, it's called a spiritual year. You didn't leave the house. It was in Dublin, out in Dundrum. I was with Palatine Fathers. And you didn't leave the house, you spent it in the house, and so there was no chance of anything. But in second year, I went to Milltown College doing philosophy. And my first morning in Milltown College with a good friend of mine back then who I was in the seminary with, we both looked at each other at our tea break at 11 o'clock and thought, we're in a gay bar.
Wow.
I was like, I joined to get away from this. I mean, there were so obviously gay men like wandering around at that coffee break.
And do you think that did they clearly have the same struggles as you then, and that's why they were there to become a priest?
I think so, because if you remember, it was illegal, and so like when you reached a certain age, I don't know, 16, 17 even, you didn't have a girlfriend, and then you got older, in your 20s, maybe early 20s, so there was like, a lot of people got married, and others took to the priesthood because it ceased the questions, the awful questions that you were constantly being asked, like, you know, when you weren't, I had 4 brothers and they were all married and getting married and everything. And you were the odd one out. You stood out like back then, like, you know, so you felt you had to do something to.
Were you getting those kind of questions? Do you have a girlfriend? When are you going to get a girlfriend? When are you going to get married? Are you going to have kids? All that kind of thing.
Oh yeah, I mean, I had a girlfriend when I was 16 to about 18. God help her. I still remember her name and everything. Like, and it was terrible. She was like, I mean, we call it now a beard. You know, the cover, and it was just a way of coping. I mean, I used to leave poor Rita on the bus home on a Saturday night to where she lived outside the city, and I would round the corner to number 4 in McCartan Street, which was just the only place we had at that time. And I was a very young man then when I discovered that place first.
Was that a place where
double life?
Was that a place where gay men in Cork hung out? Was it?
It was the first place in Cork. It was straight across from where the Garda station is now, above the
I vaguely remember
place
that.
there.
Yeah.
Number 4 it was called, in McCartan Street, and I think there was about 12 of us there for about the first 2 or 3 years.
But
like to say we were incestuous.
I remember that period because I gigged through that period and I knew a number of gay men at the time. But they were very. It was for them. Their lives were very clandestine, below the radar, because there was an awful lot of name calling. There was an awful lot of smart alecky jokes, which I'm sure must have been hurtful towards them. Although they put on a brave front, many years later I wondered, you know, how horrible it was to be making those kind of jokes that people did. They also got beaten up, name called, they were discriminated in work. It was a horrible time. Yeah. Considering now we have...
I got beaten up.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got beaten up 2 or 3 times just coming home, heading out of town late at night, like, and stuff. Not obviously doing anything, like, but I must have given off the gay vibe, you know, and just got bashed and name called and everything. And it was not great. And it didn't help then when HIV, trying to deal with HIV.
So that started as, of course, a disease in San Francisco on the West Coast. When did gay men in Cork become aware that this actually was a bigger problem than just the West Coast of Ireland? West Coast of America, apologies.
83, even 84, because we knew there was something over there. We all had kind of things, but I think a lot of people, like, we didn't have the lifestyles they had. We thought, like, you know, they had the big bathhouses and everything. If anybody knows the gay scene in San Francisco, New York, the bathhouses and everything, they were huge. I mean, they were fucking 5 or 6 stories like of a building taken up with places where gay men were able to, indulge. And so here we were all kind of clandestine, hidden and everything. So it took a while.
Do you recall the headlines coming in the papers, like the red tops at the time, gay plague? Remember all of that?
Oh, God, do I? That ad with John Hurt, the memorial ad it was called, it was when the tombstone was coming up out of the ground. It was the first ad that I really remember being vividly. It was on TV, and John Hurt, the English actor, was the voiceover. And there is a disease roaming the land. Protect yourself, and the tombstone will come up out of the ground. And it was like so stark, like that. This thing was death, basically. It was horrifying.
Yeah. And just with regards to leaving the priesthood, how did that come about? How did you decide this wasn't for me?
I began to question, I began to argue, I began to, it was the beginning of my whole loss of faith. I mean, today I'm an atheist. Yeah. And politely, I think I was asked to go.
And so to the army you went eventually. What was that like as a gay man in the army?
I look back at this, my time in the priesthood, my time in the army. I was always trying to fit in. Always trying to be part of, that male society or something. And I don't know, my dad had been in the army, and another thing I wanted to do was be a chef. And the army had started training chefs properly, sending off to college and everything. So I decided I would go in, giving no idea. Remember, at this time I was heavily drinking and giving no idea to what it would be like to be a gay man in there. And first few years, 7 years, were pretty horrendous because I drank and pretended that I was straight, really. Everywhere when we were overseas or doing anything, I was the hard drinker, one of the lads, with this awful secret. And then in 94, I got sober, and we were legalized in 93, and there was a huge change in my life. Within a year of being sober, I joined the Gay Men's Health Project over it was the South Main then and the other place, and that was the beginning of my activism.
Is that when you came? Is that when you came out? Is it up until then you had spent your entire life living with this secret?
A revolving door, I used to say, on my closet. When I was drunk, I was gay. When I was sober, I was straight. So 94 was the beginning. You never actually, I think, are ever finished coming out. Coming out happens all the time, because if you go into a new situation, meet new people, a new job, a new anything, it always kind of comes up.
But it's no longer relevant now, though, Will.
Yeah, it's not relevant, but you still would be asked. I mean, I did a degree in 2014. I went back to UCC, and within the time, like, you're joining the LGBT society, that's all great and everything, like, but you're still asked, are you gay? Well, I don't think a straight person is ever asked in their life, are you heterosexual? I mean, I'm fine with it now and everything, but back in the army, I think I coped with alcohol. And then in 99, it was legalized finally in the army. Up to then, it was still illegal in the army. So then I came openly out in the army. I was the only openly gay soldier above there in Collins's barrack. I mean, everybody would know me. If we were going overseas, we'd get a call from whoever was putting the platoon together, and they'd be looking for the gay chef. If they couldn't remember my name. It was like, I went from kind of deeply hiding everything to, becoming an activist and out there and trying to change people's opinions.
During all of that period of time, and I will move on to the noughties, but during that period of time, or even looking again at the 80s, when there was more headlines like that, wasn't there another one that's talk about God's punishment to the gay community, to homosexuals, to deviants and things like that, as they were known as at the time. Yeah. Did you know anybody that died from AIDS?
A bit like the guy who wrote it, saying, I know people who died, but I would never mention them by name or anything, because even today, as he said about the characterization, and there are families who are living with, the memories of that, and you don't want to really, for fear of,
Oh no, but we see in the show It's a Sin. One day their gay friend is there, starts to get sick, and then he disappears. They never see him again. Yeah. Was that the way their families would take over? Is it?
Oh yeah, I mean they were gone. As I said, there was a big kind of cruising community and community, and people were just gone. And you never were able to contact them or anything because families took over. Even if somebody had a partner, had been together for a few years, that was really bad. Like, I mean, partners were excluded completely, utterly, like, because they had no rights. They weren't married or whatever. So they were treated really bad, people who had partners. I suppose two people come to my mind who I was good friends with, and I never even knew it was AIDS they died of until 4 or 5 years later. I just knew I thought they had moved on or something, or they were always talking about emigrating. And it was maybe 3 or 4 years after they were dead that I'd heard, they had died of AIDS. So you didn't even get, as the show shows, I think sometimes, the writer said, you didn't even get to go to funerals.
And bearing in mind that journey that you went through and the loss of friends like that, your diagnosis of HIV in the noughties must have been a devastating diagnosis for you, was it?
I was diagnosed in 2007, the 5th of November 2007, a Monday. It's a day that always sticks with me because in all my drinking and all my using, I never got HIV, and I was tested every year. And so I was negative 2006, and in 2007, I was positive. And I know why and everything and as much as I knew by then, because I was working with the Gay Men's Health Project, I was on it was the national helpline at the time. Now we have the it was a local helpline. Now we have a national LBGT helpline, which I'm still on as a volunteer. So I knew everything about it. But the day I was diagnosed, I walked out of the Victoria Hospital over the STI clinic over there, and every bit of my knowledge went out of my head. It was like, I'm going to die. And yet the meds were good then, like in 2007. And the one thing I think that saved me was I went to a very good friend at the time, a lesbian, that night. She was the first person I actually told even. And we were sitting in her living room drinking coffee, and I started all this kind of rant about, I've got to get my own cups, I've got to get this, or what am I going to do? And she switched her coffee for my coffee, took a sup out of it, and called me an effing idiot. And that really brought me back, into my skin, it's a shit diagnosis. Nobody wants to live with it. But
listening to you, why did it come into my head just there when you were talking about that, as to whether you ever blamed the person or knew the person or recalled the sexual event that gave you the HIV? Is that fair or unfair to have that thought?
No, I mean, I've been asked that a lot of times. I'm one of the people who do know, and it doesn't matter, because when if somebody starts asking that, it can lead to all kind of unfortunate things. One of the things when somebody asked that, it's happened to me with medical people, but having nothing to do with my HIV. It was after my cancer, getting a colonoscopy. The consultant who I was dealing with asked me, which you should never ask a person living with HIV, how did I get it? And the reason I say never ask is you feel you're being judged, because you can either say blood, drugs, or sex, and the sex is the one you don't want to say, because even drugs, you're treated a bit more with sympathy.
Yeah.
And now maybe they're not judging, but when I was asked that question, I froze. But when I went back a week later for the results, I asked her registrar who was dealing with me to ask her, why did she ask me? And she made this long-winded splee about if you got it from drugs or blood, well, there's complications and this and that. And I said, stop. HIV is the virus.
Yeah.
How I got it doesn't matter. The drugs treat the virus. They don't treat how I got it or why I got it.
I don't ask you in a judgmental manner. I just ask you for with regards to your reaction. Was it of anger, or was it in this? Maybe it was completely innocent that you got it from somebody who didn't know they had it. Do you know what I mean?
When I was doing sexual health training, we always stressed the idea of your sexual health is your responsibility. So you're the one who insists on condoms or whatever, So when I knew who I got it from and the guy I got it from, he never put a gun to my head. He didn't tell me he was positive. Now, he denied it later when we were talking. But I just had to accept.
Yeah.
I went along and agreed. It wasn't a great year for me. Both my parents had died in a very short space of each other at that time, and I never grieved properly. So I think it was 2006 was a year I wasn't taking care of myself, and just started doing things I would never normally have done. So I can't blame him for that, is what I'm saying. Like, I really can't.
Yeah.
That's just how I deal with it. I know other people get very angry, and so we all react differently. Like, but no, I didn't actually.
But the meds are incredible now, aren't they? There is just so much medical availability that you live a perfectly healthy life.
The meds are brilliant. I mean, the meds, and the great thing about people don't realize about the meds is I'm on my fourth combination, because there is side effects from medication, but you don't have to suffer the side effects. I always say this to anybody, because we have a support group here in Cork, and if anybody comes along, if you're suffering from side effects and anything, speak up to the consultant at the HIV clinic. Let them know, because you can switch to until you get a regime that suits you.
But it's fair to say, isn't it, that people are still getting HIV, yeah?
Ireland, we seem to be one of the few countries Western countries, that is still on the rise. And I put that down, really I put that down to our attitude to sex.
How?
And poor sex education still.
Unprotected sex.
We don't talk openly about sex. Yeah, we don't talk openly about sex. We're not educated properly about sex. Now, it's a long time since I was in school, but people that I speak to, younger people, sex education still seems to be all about, like, pregnancy prevention, whatever. Like, it's not about relationships. It's not about life. When I got cancer, I noticed it was only when I got cancer, I noticed that there was so much stuff on TV, week in, week out, different ads, different support groups, different fundraising for different cancers. And I was like thinking to myself, if we did this for HIV? Yeah,
but you know why? It's because people by and large think that HIV led on to AIDS, and all of that happened in the 80s and doesn't happen anymore. HIV is still here, although you will not get AIDS. Am I right in that?
Oh yeah, HIV is here, but like, there's no need for HIV. I mean, there is no need, because with U equals U, I'm no longer infectious. If I'm taking my medication, my viral load is suppressed by my medication. It's undetectable. That means I can't pass it on any longer.
So U equals U means undetectable, means it's untransmissible. The young people that you talk to, and perhaps have seen It's a Sin, were they aware, are they aware of how much better they have it now than, say, 30, 35, 40 years ago?
I watched an interview with the cast on BBC News about a week and a half ago, the cast of the show, and they were getting calls and infos from young gay men in particular who were shocked that this had taken place. They were not aware of how bad it was, or that this had occurred in, it's not that long ago.
No.
They had no idea of what really went on, and how lucky now, like that, where they are. But I would still say to this day, among the gay community, now those in the know, you always have to go, there are those who knew though, but there is still a lot of, when I'm on the helpline, the LGBT helpline, first of all, I ask, why do we still need it if everything is so great, a helpline? You would get calls from people, like particularly in your rural areas, who have no support, who know nothing, who don't want to be out in the local little village, gossip and everything like about them. So if they're diagnosed, just like back in the 80s with HIV, where did they go? Who did they talk to about it? I know two people, one from Roscommon, one from Sligo, who are both now probably 18 and 21 years diagnosed. And the only people they've ever spoken to about their HIV is the clinic that they attend in Dublin. They've never spoken to family. They've never spoken to... Because if you speak about it... I'm just thinking of a funny incident, actually. I have a straight friend who's positive, and his whole family were shocked, and they all wanted to know how long he was gay when he was diagnosed. And it was like... This is like going back only about 4 or 5 years ago.
I know, but you can't blame them, sure. They're just, like an awful lot of us, we kind of gloss over topics until it visits, you think HIV, you think AIDS, you know what I mean? But it's straight men, it's women, it's drug users, of course it is, it's gay men. But I just think of the distance that's been travelled since those days. Marriage equality in 2015, we've even moved on further now with gender identity change legal. I mean, we've gone at a fair old gallop, in fairness.
Yeah, I think that in the Western developed world we have, but they're starting to air it's a sin now in the States, and there's a lot of questioning about fear from certain HIV activists that it could make people think like, that it's still like this and stuff, but also it's raising awareness that it's okay for people like me, say places where I can speak out and everything, but where it's still illegal to be gay. HIV is a real problem, because just like when it was in the 80s here, they can't talk about being positive. Some of them are not even going for, treatment or anything, because I have a friend from Russia.
I was just going to ask you about Russia. Yeah. It's illegal, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh, there are no gays in Russia. It's like he came out with Putin came out at one time, and somebody else in the Ukraine. We have no gays over here, and he told me the treatment there is unbelievable. You could go for your HIV meds when you're first diagnosed, and you're given your meds, and then you come back 3 months later. It's usually 3 months when you're diagnosed first. It's every 6 months now from me. And when you go back the second time because you have to take them every day, they just turn around to say something like, "Oh, we don't have the ones we gave you, but we have these things, or we don't have any. Come back next month." And it's almost like they want to almost kill off the population who have HIV.
Unreal. Unreal.
He moved here to try to get away from that. Oh, it's really so. I really think, I'm not trying to be on a downer or anything. I think, yes, we have come on really great here. I mean, if you had told me as a young man when I grew up in the 60s and 70s in Ireland that we were going to have marriage, we were going to have a gay Taoiseach, everything was going to be, I literally would have probably laughed in your face and told you, because my life, my life then was just, it was a survival. It was a quiet life of desperation, is the way I describe it. I'm writing a book about those times, My Secret Life. And I just could never have envisaged that we'd have this now. And my hope would be that we in Ireland would be an example. And I think we are, from listening to people that I talk to in different support groups and everything, who actually come here to get away from, how bad it is still in other countries. I think it's one area we can hold our head up about our diversity. No, it's not all great, but I think we're a lot better than most places. I really do.
I am so looking forward to reading the book. When shall that be? Do you know?
This is in the writing of 4 years, because the first half is completely about growing up gay, and it's bleak, it's desperate, suicide attempts. So I'm starting the second half now, which is hopefully the uplifting part, how I dealt with it all and everything, because I was hoping that the whole idea behind the book is how my growing up as a young gay man, when it was all illegal, and hiding it and calling it my secret life, affected my diagnosis of my HIV. Because when I got HIV, I faced a bit of a dilemma. Do I now retreat into a HIV closet, almost like I did with when I was growing up gay? And I made the decision, no, that whole life helped me really to cope with being out. And that's why I'm such an activist in HIV.
Well, good luck with that and all other aspects of your life. Thank you for your openness. Thank you for your honesty. As I say, I'm looking forward to the book. It may well have a bleak start, but there were bleak times and it has to be portrayed. Good to catch up with you, Will. Yeah. Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Okay, Neil. Thanks very much.
Bye. Take care.
Much.
Bye. Take care.
Much.
Bye.